with Mount Everest. 80% of the deaths that occur for the climbers on that mountain are on the way down, which means that those climbers most likely summited the mountain and we did it, we're on top of the world.
Meet Kristin Herman. She's a financial and wealth advisor with Northwestern Mutual. What sets her apart? Well, she takes the time to get to know her clients. She helps you with peace in your heart from a wholehearted wealth approach. She'll ask the right questions to help you with your financial goals, whether that's retirement planning, personal financial goals, or business planning. Kristin has 15 plus years of experience to help you on your journey. Contact Kristin Herman today at Kristin-Herman.com. Set up your appointment and let her help you on your journey to financial independence. Hello, Empower Nation. Welcome to Empower Her Money podcast. I'm your host, Angela Duncan, and we talk all things money and business. Today's episode is sponsored by Kristin Herman. She is a financial and wealth advisor with Northwestern Mutual. She's going to talk about her wholehearted wealth approach, what that means, and why money is a measure of desire, and you must have peace in your heart when it comes to investing. Hi, Kristin. Welcome to Empower Her Money podcast. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me, Angela.
Yeah, awesome. So I would love for you to start off with your story, your journey, and kind of how you got to what you're doing today.
Absolutely. So funny enough, when I was in high school, I went on my first mission trip and thought that's what I wanted to do with my life. I went 4 consecutive years over spring break to Honduras. And it just captured my whole heart. And I said, I don't want to be anywhere but Honduras after I graduate. Well, going into college, my dad said, Kristen, I think you would do well in business. And I was like, oh, Dad, I'm not about making money. I want to help people. Well, we can make money and help people, right? So right. Dad was right. I ended up declaring a business management and marketing minor, management major, marketing minor in college, and needed an internship to graduate. And this was in 2009. Which is crazy that it's been 15 years ago now. But in the wake of the economic crisis at that point, massive layoffs and bailouts. And it was like, okay, what companies are hiring interns? I need an internship to graduate. And a classmate of mine, her dad had been with this company that she said, it's AAA rated. They paid a 7.5% dividend when the market was down 37%. And oh, by the way, they have a top 10 internship in the nation. I was like, what kind of company is this? And so applied online. It was a financial representative intern with incredible firm that I'm still with today. And I never would have seen myself staying there. I just thought, oh, that'll look great on a resume. And here we are 15 years later.
Yeah, it was meant to be, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what exactly is it that you do today, and how do you, help people? Because obviously you have a servitude heart and it was meant for you to help people. But this was just maybe a different path than you had originally planned. So talk about what you do today and how you kind of tie that into helping people.
Absolutely. Okay. So give a little bit more context here and why I am so convicted that this is what I was made to do and impact the world. My husband has a psychology background, and interestingly enough, we didn't know each other at this point, but it was around 2008, 2009 that he started to see how people were responding to the meltdown and the crisis of our economy, and he was just reflecting on that, and he says that money is a measure of desire. You're going to spend more or less on something depending on how much you want it. And desire is a measure of the heart. Where is one looking for security, success, satisfaction, pleasure? That's where they're going to put their money, whether they spend it or save it, right? Money is inextricably tied to our hearts. And any insecurity that we feel will come out in the way that we relate to and spend money. And so people often share with me that in our conversations, it's not uncommon that they're like, thanks for the counseling session, right? We're talking about their planning, their goals, but money, it's so much more than that, right?
Yes.
It's a measure of desire. What do you really want? And what insecurities do you feel? And so super passionate about helping people, steward the resources well. Often the more people have, the more they have to worry about. And so I end up being like a wealth counselor, so that they can also have peace in their hearts.
Yeah,
so we take a heart-centric approach to planning and financial advising.
Yeah. And I think that's so necessary too, because so many, like we grow up very differently, right? Your parents taught you something, your family, your environment taught you something about money, and you carry that into your adulthood.
Yes.
And we don't always realize how emotional that is. So I love that you take the heart, centered approach, because when you tie that heart to your actual future goals, I feel like it's just so much more exciting to achieve, so I really like that approach.
Yeah. And I heard a quote one time that our subconscious is responsible for like 80, maybe 90% of the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. And so that's that, underlying, we don't know, it's not at the conscious level, the decisions that we're making. And so therefore it's engaging in our story work and understanding what has shaped the way that I relate to and spend money or view the world, or that motivates me to find success or security or pleasure, and getting in touch with our story there. Not that, I know some people have more traumatic stories than others, but even if it's like this, it seems somewhat boring, like it is so valuable to do that work. Though like a tree, it's that underground work, right? The root system is the most important aspect of a tree. Did you know that often trees roots go as deep and wide as the tree does as high? So we want to bear external fruit. I think that's innate in people, that we want to grow, we want to make an impact. I think especially for women, impact is a high value for most of us. But in order for it to be sustainable and long-term, we have to have a strong root system. And that's our engine lives of thoughts and beliefs.
So what do you feel like is the most common block, or maybe the most common issue when clients come to you that maybe they just can't see that you can really truly help them get to the other side?
Fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, fear. And we don't always go at that head on, right? But we all feel some sort of insecurity. I was listening to this book last night. I tend to just like be a galvanizer and share about other people's, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell everyone about this. It's called The Gap in the Game. Dan Sullivan and another co-author, talking about high achievers and how often we are hardwired to look to things out there. And I realized I had lived my life with this conditional sense of well-being. Like I'm okay as long as there's enough money in the bank, as long as people think highly of me, as long as my kids aren't incessantly whining or fighting with each other. But then if those things that are often outside of my control aren't going well, you may not have seen a pretty side of me. And it was as my kids are 8, 6, and 3 this spring. But as they were younger, I realized like I love them with my whole heart, but I'm not always, my actions aren't always displaying that. And so getting to the root of, okay, what am I really afraid of here? And how do I find secure attachment and my identity in who I am versus what I do or accomplish or what people think about me? So
Yeah,
the
that's
Gap in
awesome.
the Game also touched on that. It's about worthiness. Like you don't have to do anything to prove it. And it's amazing that when you find that internal sense of well-being, even when circumstances around us might try to tell us a different story, it's like you realize it's okay. Like often I'm my biggest critic. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of what I'm going to tell myself and how I ascribe my value to outcomes versus no. It's already settled. Like I'm worthy because of who I am, not what I do. And I don't have to prove it, but I get to. It gets to be what I do gets to be an overflow, and I can perform from identity rather than for it.
Yeah. I think one of the hardest things for me when it comes to investing in general is, if you think back to high school and we studied algebra, right? If you're solving an equation, you have to have a couple of factors. But when you're like planning for retirement, for example, I have no idea how long I'm going to live. And I have no idea what the
Mhm.
tax structure is going to look like in that
Mhm.
future. So, talk about some ways you maybe help walk people through, that very uncertain fear of like, am I going to
So
have
good.
enough money, right, before I pass away? I don't want to have to be a burden to anybody else.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I love this analogy with Mount Everest. 80% of the deaths that occur for the climbers on that mountain are on the way down, which means that those climbers most likely summited the mountain and like, we did it, we're on top of the world. But the journey is not over. And so
Mhm.
often, and this was a massive, just shaped the way that I view the world and want to make an impact. So my dad, that again was so influential in my life, 6 years ago, he was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer. He was only 57 years old. And
Mm.
he battled for about 8 months before he died. And he had saved a ton, right? Like my mom is totally financially secure, which we're so grateful for. But at the same time, as he was dying and as he was reflecting on his life, he was so open-hearted, sharing about what did he really value about how he lived, what did he deeply regret. And at one point, Angela, he was weeping. Now, part of it may have been the pain meds because it was like his emotions were
Right.
just right there beneath the surface. But it was so precious. And this is 3 months before he died. It was like this divine encounter that he was like, I could have been more generous. And
Mm.
not that he wasn't generous, but the way that I see it, he didn't put it in this way, but I saw it in my own thinking and, relating to money was this scarcity mindset.
Mhm.
And like I do value generosity and have given a lot. I said, okay, well, if I'm going to be in the business world and be in this position where I can help a lot of people and make a lot of money, I want to give a lot away. And yet I saw in my own experience, I like this is 10 years ago, but my husband and I went on this coffee date. It was like, oh, this, buy one, get one free. I love a great deal. My family's really competitive. And so that feels like winning, right? When it's you get something free. We show up an hour before it started. It was like 1 o'clock. It actually wasn't starting until 2. I got so mad. I like killed the date because we didn't get the deal. And that's what I had like fixated. Like, I want to do this. And so realizing, okay, let's back it up. Let's keep the big things big and the small things small, like $7, an extra, it's nothing, right?
Mhm.
So shifting to that abundance versus scarcity, it is not an overnight process.
Yeah.
But if we can become more aware of that and just this like certainty of I'm going to be okay, even when things don't go as planned or expected. Now, on the other side of that, going back to your question, Angela, of how do we plan? How do we make sure that we're not going to run out of money? We often do need to save and accumulate quite a bit, like especially for people that want to retire at, I would say the average retirement age is 65. But I talk to a lot of people that want to be done sooner than that. And
Mhm.
a couple of just key tenets for success are one, we want to have multiple, or most people that do well, they have multiple resources, multiple assets or
Mhm.
buckets that it's not all their eggs in one basket, right? So and here's a picture of most people have actually 3 different segments of their wealth. They have the home run segment. That might be their business. It might be a medical practice or employer stock, right? So that typically stands for a real estate, right? It might be the greatest growth opportunity, but yet there's no guarantee, right? We can lose money in that. And so, but often if they're doing well, they share with us like, hey, we're consistently getting double-digit rates of return. And yet they get to a point where they're like, but I want to start to take some of the proverbial chips off the table and put it elsewhere. And so then there's the aggressive segment, and that is often money that's in the market, whether it's, in a 401k, Roth IRA, non-qualified investment account, where we know in the long run the market goes up, but there's volatility, right? You can lose money still with that. And then invariably, Angela, people have an increasing appreciation for sleep well at night dollars, right? The safe segment as their wealth grows, as they get older. And the problem in the real world is that it's highly inefficient because that's taxed at our highest marginal rate, any income that we get interest on bonds or savings or CDs. It's great to finally be getting a little bit of return, right? In money markets today and CDs, but it's still taxed at our highest marginal rate. And so often the people that we work with, they've got these different buckets of money. And what I often hear is we're maxing out a 401k. They might be doing a backdoor Roth IRA. We've got our business and our home run, but they're not really clear on, they don't have a plan. Like, what does this mean for me? Like, I'm told that I need to save and take advantage of these tax efficient places to sock away money. But when the rubber hits the road, what does that look like 10, 20, 30 years from now? And so that's where we come in and just simply help them kind of like in a plane, like they may be on track, but what if we could make it more aerodynamic or take less risk or, help them to realize, oh, you're actually doing a great job and you could be done a little bit sooner, or you may not need to work as hard as you think you do. Like I find a lot of women and high achievers, myself included, like we can have this tendency to burn the wick at both ends and like constantly be pouring out. And then we get to this place of like, this isn't sustainable. Like something has to give. And so what if wealth doesn't necessarily look like a certain number in the bank account or in the investment account or anything like that? What if it's this state of being? And not that those things don't matter, right? Because it's like, I love the plans and helping, like I said, I love good deals. And part of that is coming to people and sharing with them, oh my gosh, here's some shifts that you can make that will, get you from here to here and just impact and improve their situation with not that much more effort. So anyway, that's a long answer to your question, but
no, but I mean, it's important for people to understand that when they do meet with you, even though you have some unknown variables that could or could not happen in the future, you're able to sit down with them and put together a good plan so that they feel good about what they're doing, about where they're heading. They're knowledgeable about what's going on and what they might need and some options for them. So I love that that's something that you can provide to the clients too.
Totally. And I will say too, Angela, it really is a dynamic process, right? It's not a one-time set it and forget it. My heart of hearts is to build long-term transformational relationships with people, not to be transactional. Some people, they're like, hey, I need this quick fix. And it's like, well, go do that. Maybe we can help them with it. Maybe we can't. But in my, just the highest version of who I see myself and how are we making an impact on the world, it really is like building these long-term relationships. And we need that over time, right? To course correct and, thinking about a long flight, right? You can be on course and then after, 30 minutes or an hour in the air, you could be on target for something totally different. Okay, let's come back here and, get back on course.
Yeah. So I would love for you to talk about, I know in your industry, there's some minimum requirements as far as education. You touched on that you read. So obviously you go above and beyond those minimum requirements because this is really important. These are people's life savings sometimes that you're dealing with. So talk a little bit more about like the education and why that's so important to you as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, when I was 22, and started as an intern, and even 23, 24 full time, I had this major sense of imposter syndrome. I didn't know it at the time, but I didn't know the phrase, but I felt like this little girl in my dad's suit jacket, like this oversized, like, oh, that's cute, but it doesn't really fit you. I knew I was smart, but at the same time, the financial services industry, at least at the time when I started, it was 96%, 94 or 96% male dominated. So very rare for women to be financial advisors. I think it is becoming more common, which is awesome. But also when I started in my young 20s, it was like, okay, who am I? Who do I think I am? Like trying to help people with their lifetime savings. And so that led me to start to get credentialed and pass these tests. It's like the, masters in financial planning and insurance. And in 2016, I was 8 months pregnant with my first daughter, and I sat for the certified financial planner exam and I passed it. Such a relief.
And that's not an easy exam either.
No.
So congrats.
I remember many a late night studying and having this big old belly and like, I just pray that I pass so that I don't have to keep studying after my daughter's born. So that, and there's continuing education along that. But yeah, another credential that's on the radar that I've already been working in the retirement distribution phase. So like when you think back to that Mount Everest analogy, right? Accumulation phase, like climbing the mountain, is relatively simple, right? It's like, how do we accumulate wealth? How do we grow it tax efficiently and control the risk and all that? And then, part of the risk is let's make sure, okay, if something unexpected happened, if you got sick or hurt and couldn't work or passed away prematurely, that your lifestyle or your family's lifestyle is protected, right? So it's basic, like let's grow wealth and let's also put a line in the sand and maybe use some insurance planning to help, ensure that you get to the finish line. And finish line, I mean, of financial independence, like where you summit the mountain and then start to go down. That's where we end up being like a Sherpa and a guide to say, okay, there's a lot less margin for error, right? 80% of the deaths that occur on Mount Everest are on the way down. And for people in that distribution phase of planning, whether it's how do I know I'm not going to outlive my money? How do I control the risk of the market? What if I need long-term care, right? There's 6 main risks in retirement. And so we want to help make sure that people don't get to zero before they die, right? Like we want to make that money last. And it's interesting. The American College of Financial Services gives this analogy of ants and grasshoppers. So some people are like ants with their money where I tend to fall in this category of ants work really hard and they're planning for future seasons. They're willing to give up pleasure and satisfaction now for the sake of arriving well-positioned tomorrow, right? And you think about the grasshoppers that are more free and floating about and not planning for the future, but they're enjoying life along the way, right? So those would be more like savers versus spenders. And so both, as you can imagine, like with my dad, I saw this he had saved a ton, but yet like wish that he would have, and my mom has even said this multiple times, like, I wish we would have traveled more. Not that they didn't take trips, but been more free to enjoy life along the way because we're not promised to live until we're 95. And so it is this balance of, people can get to 60 or 65 and the plan can look amazing. Like, hey, you're going to end up with millions when you die. And yet they're still afraid to spend, right? Maybe they're the ants and maybe they do live well within their means still. And then they wake up at 80 or 85 and realize, oh my gosh, we could have done so much more. And now our kids are going to be well positioned, but that's not the highest priority for them.
Right.
So,
right.
Wherever people are, there is, there's whether, I don't know if we're a good fit for them, but whoever they are, there's so much fun. We don't know what we don't know. and so having someone to help weigh in and understand, okay, what do you really desire? What are your motivations? What are you afraid of? And practically, how do we help you know what's most meaningful can also be measurable?
Yeah, love that. I love your heart-centered approach, the whole heart. I love that you're a relationship builder. I think that's very important when you're talking about your money, especially. So, Kristen, it has been such a pleasure with you on Empower Her Money podcast today. How does our audience get in touch with you?
So my website is Kristin, Kristin Herman. I'm sure you can put it in the show notes. Kristin-Herman, HERMAN.com. I'm also on LinkedIn or Facebook. I'm more personal page. I don't have do as much on the business side on Facebook and Instagram, but I'm on there. So happy to connect. But yeah, feel free to check out the website. And I think there's a way that you can click contact me. So happy to have a conversation. Always approach it open-hearted, open-handed, no expectations, but happy to see if there's a way that we can help and bring value and just chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, my pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning into Empower Her Money podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, share this podcast, and leave a review wherever you are tuning in.